Hey guys, so this video is our first video on cell signaling. This video is going to cover the components of cell signaling and to understand the difference in the different types of cell signaling. And by the end of this video, you should be able to tell the difference between the 4 different types of cell signaling. So what is cell signaling? It's our cell's way of communicating to one another and sending messages from one cell to the next. Now in cell signaling, there are some components that are found in all different types. You've got a cell that is sending a chemical message, and that chemical message is called a ligand. Now that is a generic term for a wide range of chemical messages. You've got a target cell, which is where the message is intended to go, with a specific receptor. So as you can see in this diagram, you've got this is our sending cell, these round circles are our ligands, and here is the receptor that is complementary, meaning that this ligand will bind with this receptor. And that will initiate some sort of response by that cell. This other cell doesn't have the right receptor and therefore won't receive that message. So it means that cell signaling is highly specific, and all forms of cell signaling rely off this sort of diagram. So there are 4 types we're going to learn about today: endocrine, paracrine, autocrine, and pheromones. And they're just 4 different types of cell signaling. So the first we're going to look at is endocrine signaling. Now that is where signaling is carried a considerable distance to a target cell. So for example, humans might use their bloodstream, or plants might use what's called their vascular tissue, which is their sort of version of a bloodstream, I guess. So in this diagram, you can see here's our sending cell. And in this instance, it's sending out a hormone. So that's our ligand. It's traveling through the bloodstream to a cell with the right receptor. So you can see this cell doesn't receive the message because its receptor isn't correct, whereas this target cell is complementary to the hormone, and therefore it binds and will make some sort of change. So that shows our sending, our ligand, and our receiving are very highly specific. For example, again, we might use this for hormones, which we just seen in that last diagram. We also use it to send out immune system signals, Plants might use it to send hormones throughout the plant body. Ethylene's a really good example to know. It's sent to the fruits to help them ripen, and that's using their xylem and phloem as shown in this diagram here. The second type of signaling is paracrine signaling. Now that is signaling that is for much shorter distances. It's where a signal is produced that will change nearby cells. You can see in this diagram, this is an example of the nervous system. You've got this cell is sending out a neurotransmitter, which is just a ligand in this case, and the next cell is receiving that message. So again, something like acetylcholine is an example of what they would use in the nervous system. And you've gone from one cell to the next, which is very nearby. And that allows the message to be passed very quickly between cells. So paracrine is a really good example of a short distance signaling molecule. The third type is autocrine. This is where you have a cell sends out a message which actually is received by itself. And you can see that's going to cause some sort of change within the own cell. So here you've got a cell releasing a ligand, these little red circles, and they're going actually back and binding to its own receptors. And we would use this for things like cell growth and development. When we're sending out something like a growth factor, this cell is sending it out to be received by itself. We also use this in the immune system. So let's say hypothetically this cell was infected with a virus and it realized it might actually send out a ligand that actually goes back and tells that cell to destroy itself. So it's going to be sending a message back to itself, which is an example of autocrine signaling. The last type is pheromones. Now these are unique in the fact that they're actually sent between individuals of the same species, and they're usually in the form of a gas. So you can see in this diagram, you've got this fly or bee is sending out a pheromone as a gas, which is being received by the other individual of the same species. And that might be indicating for it to reproduce, for it to attack, or for it to start doing certain tasks. And usually they are for these much more social type of interactions. It's unlike a peacock. A peacock would use a physical visual message by displaying its feathers, whereas here we've got a picture of a moth. It's going to send out a pheromone and it's going to be received by the receptors on its antennae. So under a microscope, these antennae are covered in hundreds and hundreds of little receptors that receive those pheromone messages. Horses, you may have seen them do this when they open up their top lip. It's because their receptors for pheromones are actually located in that location. So by opening their mouth, they're making it easy to accept those pheromones that might be for when, let's say, a female or a male is ready to reproduce. So in review, there are 4 types of cell signaling. All of them rely on ligands, receptors, target cells, and they're all highly specific. So that's just the basics of how cells will communicate to one another. Thanks very much for watching.